Oh, okay. I'm a little off center. Well, hello, everyone. How are you doing? I hope you are doing well. As you noticed, we have different studio decor for a moment. I've got my pink rooster that I just had to have about maybe 15 years ago. That Wayne is like, why do you have to have that? I'm like, I just have to have it. And now you see. So the unicorn mask, I've had enough of that. That's going to Goodwill. For right now, we've got Bunchy and we've got Mr. Rooster. I noticed in the comments that perhaps there was some confusion. No, Ben Shapiro literally is not going to be on my show. I would really... Nathan, you are so funny. Nathan, I'm just going to put it on the screen. And if YouTube demonetizes me, then Nathan's going to owe me a super chat. That's all we're going to say, is you can read Nathan's comment up top. And we will leave it at that. And hopefully I won't get demonetized for this video. Otherwise, you do owe me a super chat. Super chats and super thanks are always welcome. Let me do the YouTuber stuff. And as I promised, the personal stuff will go at the end now, so that we will get right into the subject matter, which is interacting with a video clip of Ben Shapiro on the idea of rights. So please let me do my YouTuber stuff. And if you'd like personal questions answered, I can't promise I'm going to, but I answer almost everything. You send a super chat, I'm going to almost certainly answer it, unless it's something completely inappropriate or something that I can't talk about. So first but not least, you know, little old me with my consistent self that won't follow the hive mind. I'm once again in hot water. Things are a lot different now. You know, right now, I have the Obi-Wan Kenobi vibe. Strike me down and I will become stronger than ever. Listen, people are going to do what they're going to do, and I'm going to continue to work for liberty, and I am going to continue to work to make the Libertarian Party libertarian again, rather than a party that supports, as Keith Thompson said, Trump rallies with a mustache on. So patreon.com/Pink Flame of Liberty. If you're appreciating my voice will always be on this channel, no matter what they do. My voice will always be on this channel. But Ruben the Imitator was upset because it wasn't really Ben Shapiro. I'm so sorry. I'll talk to Ben. Get Ben to talk to me. Get him to talk to a pink-haired libertarian. I know he'll immediately think that I'm some kind of progressive, which I definitely am not. Please follow me on Twitter. Yes, I will always call it Twitter, but as courtesy to Elon, I call it now X Twitter. I am Karen Ann Harlos. It's spelled a little differently. You can see it on the screen. And last but not least, if you are new to this channel, and even if you're not, if you haven't subscribed yet, it helps me a lot and it costs you nothing. So I really, really appreciate it. One announcement, and then we will get to the content and do the personal stuff at the end. Here is the announcement. Who knows how long it will last. I do so many shows. I enjoy doing shows. I have the Cult of RONR with Mike Seebeck. Please go subscribe to that, Cult of RONR. I also have Pink Parliamentarian, which really hasn't launched yet. When it officially launches, it's a business channel. It's my parliamentary stuff. Then all the appropriate disclosures will be made and there'll be an official launch. But I'm probably starting another channel, and it has nothing to do with politics at all. It has to do with two of my true loves. My true love of all is history. I think you guys know that. I love history. No matter what field I'd been in, whether it was theology, whether it was working on Via de Cristo, now what politics, my love is history. But something you may not know is that I have a love of words and etymology. And I am hoping to combine those two into a show where we are going to be looking at, what do you call them, extinct or going extinct words that we just don't use anymore. We're going to dig them up, or perhaps phrases. I was somewhat inspired by Way with Words, which does this, which taught me the phrase that wet birds don't fly at night, which is like one of my favorite expressions. And also, a goose just walked over my grave, which is an expression I'd known for a while. Some people say a ghost. I learned in the far south, so there's regional differences. So I'll give you the name of that and let you know when I'm doing it, if I actually can, because I barely have time to do this. This will always be my main channel. So what we're going to do is I'm going to get Ben Shapiro on the screen, and I'm going to attempt to put me on the screen because, as you know, and hello, Rod, as you know, this isn't I'm not a professional. There's Vivian, who does that review show, who goes, don't try this at home. I'm an MFing professional. I'm not a professional. Definitely try this at home. So let's first get Ben up. I did not like the way that came out. That's what she said. And oh my goodness, just bad memories of him rapping WAP have just came to get it out of my head. Sweet baby Jesus, get it out of my head. Okay, so we're going to bring Ben up and try to put my face on there too. And then we will talk about what he has to say. You notice my lighting's a little better. I got a light over here, but it's blinding me if you hadn't noticed. So I'm looking for my mute mic button over here. Okay. All right. I'm going to put Ruben will deal with that personal comments at the absolute end, if you don't mind. So we're going to put Ben up. So let's get Ben here.
Because rights is actually a group of ideas that we don't...
Okay, now you can hear me. I want to try to get me on the screen here as well. Okay, there I am. So I think if I put myself over here, I am not interfering too much with you seeing Ben. Okay, we're going to let him talk about rights. I wrote notes, so I am maybe an MFN professional a little bit more here. But because I'm an old lady, the glasses will be coming on and off. But I look pretty damn good for an old lady. But here we go. So let me mute my mic so that you're not... I do have some pink headphones. I just can't get them to work. We're going to mute my mic and let Ben talk. I am sorry that this clip has the Wondershare Filmora watermark on it. It wouldn't let me log into my account. Now you know the editing program I use is Wondershare Filmora. They're not paying me for an ad, but apparently they're getting a free ad on this video. Okay, so muting.
Find very vaguely in American life, and we kind of throw the word around in messy ways. So there was an American jurist, early 20th century, named Wesley Newcomb Holfeld, very famous in legal circles, and he broke rights down into 4 categories. This is really important stuff, because if you want to understand what people mean when they are talking about rights, you have to determine which kind of right they're talking about. So he said there are 4 kinds of rights. There are privileges. Privileges.
Okay, stopping for a second here, and I'm going to hope to remember to unmute each time. Ooh, that light is really blinding me. I got to turn it to the side a little, even though that's the best lighting. It was just completely blinding me, and I need to move my other stuff here. I do not agree with this idea that there are four kinds of quote-unquote rights. Now, throughout philosophical history, people have tried to define rights in so many different ways. And obviously, as a libertarian, hardcore libertarian, this is something that's really important to me. I actually think there are only 2 kinds of rights. Why are we overly complicating things? Now, maybe you've got your little... Who is it? It's Kamala Harris that loves Venn diagrams. I like outlines. So, you have your negative rights, and your positive rights, and maybe you have some subgroupings under there. That's maybe what this jurist is trying to do, but making 4 major categories of rights, I think is crazy. So, before we get more into what Ben has to say, let me just tell you what the 4 categories he's going to say are. I'm going to let him define each one, and then I'm gonna redefine it in the way that I prefer. And we'll talk about it in a libertarian context. And Nathan asked, and I'm going to try to stick this on the screen, wasn't it Hume that documented negative rights? I'm not sure. I think you're correct, though. But I don't want to say for sure. So the 4 that Ben is going to outline are privileges, claims, powers, and immunities. And I'm just going to tell you right off the bat that I am going to put privileges under negative rights. Claims are positive rights. Powers I absolutely deny. And immunities are a mix of negative and positive rights. So just wanted to give that little intro. So the first thing he's going to talk about is what the jurist, I forgot the name already, that he said it was privileges, which I believe are just negative rights. And we'll talk about what I mean by that and so on and so forth. Please, please. I love the audience interaction.
Are things where you have a right to do them. Like you have an active moral right to do the thing because they're a matter of either moral good or moral apathy. So for example, you have a right to give charity. Of course you do. That's a moral good. Or you have a right to eat a hamburger because we are completely indifferent as a society as to whether you eat a hamburger or whether you don't eat a hamburger. Right? These are what we would call privileges. So
Okay. Those aren't what I would call privileges. Those are what I would call negative rights, and I would disagree with his definition of it. So what is a negative right? And that word tends to confuse people because the word negative is, well, negative. It has a bad connotation to it. But what negative rights are simply rights that you have inherently that people cannot forbid you forcibly from exercising. They don't have to do anything to help you exercise them, but they cannot coercively interfere with them by their nature. So, for instance, my classic example is I have a right to life. What does that mean to you? And don't bring the whole abortion debate into it. I'm not even going there right now. I've done that in plenty of shows. But what it means is that you can't kill me. You can't forcibly interfere with my right to life. But also what that means is that you don't have to do anything to fulfill it either. If I'm starving, you don't have to feed me. You can't forcibly interfere with me obtaining food from a willing vendor or provider, but you can't actively do something to interfere with my right to life. There's all kinds of negative rights, and they stem from the principle of self-ownership, that you own yourself, and we mean that in a bit of a different way than like you would own property, but it means you have the best claim to your own body, and you get to do with it what you wish, as long as you do not violate the negative rights of others. It is, in one sense, it's moral because you own yourself, and I do think it's immoral to deny that. But Matt, I was going to say Matt because I normally deal with him, but Ben is tying these quote-unquote privileges to things that you have a right to do because they're either morally good, and I'd say by whose standard, or there is moral apathy towards them. People are morally neutral towards them. Again, by whose standard? A libertarian would say, even if everyone else in the world thinks it's immoral, if you are not interfering with the negative rights of others, you have a right to do it. Let's just give an example of polygamy. Let's just throw that out there. Let's say everyone in the world thinks that's immoral. And you're a man and you've got 10 wives. And everyone in the world thinks that's immoral. But you guys, you all are fine with it. You 11. God bless you, guy who can have 10 wives. Ben would think you don't have a right to do that because it's immoral. But immoral by whom? When you deal with negative rights in the sense that it is something that you have the right to do, no matter how anyone else feels about it in their personal morality, that is something that actually is grounded in something. Now, that's not saying we're in an amoral universe, because I do think the fact that you own yourself and you have the right then to do with yourself what you wish, as long as you do not forcibly interfere with that equal right of others, is the ultimate morality. But it's not the totality of morality. It is the bedrock, and then each of us is going to add on top of that. When people try to make libertarianism a complete moral system, which he will get into without using the word libertarianism, we run into all kinds of problems. The fact is, libertarianism only deals with the idea of justice. Each individual libertarian is going to add to that their own individual moralities, but they can't force those onto other people. But you might go, but can you force your view of negative rights on others? If you always have to come down to a foundational principle. It's not turtles all the way down. You do come to a final turtle, and the final turtle is negative rights. It is asking about the married bachelor. If you ask, well, aren't you forcing yourself on others if you force negative rights? No, it's an axiom. Everything eventually comes down to axioms. It is axiomatic that you own yourself. And because of that, using Hoppe's actually argumentation ethics, that if you don't own yourself, any argument you make against self-ownership is illogical, because why should we care what you have to think when you don't even have ownership over yourself? It's almost like some theologian tell me what it is. It's like presuppositional apologetics, but who's the guy who made it? Rothtillian. You got guys, maybe you'll remember the name. It's just escaping my mind right now, but it's very much like presuppositional apologetics. All systems have underlying presuppositions. All systems do. Even if your underlying presupposition is that there are no underlying presuppositions. And the underlying presupposition, which I do think is grounded in our own reality, and it's falsifiable, is that you own yourself. Because if you don't, Van Tillian, That's what it is. It's not Tertullian. It was Van Til. Van Til's the father of presuppositional apologetics. This is very argumentation ethics of Hoppe are very much like Van Tillian presuppositional apologetics. So there's where we come down to an axiom. An axiom is at a point at which you can go no further. You can change your axioms if you find better evidence for other axioms. It's not that you can't prove an axiom, it's just that you can't go any further. And there is a tiny bit of element of faith in axioms. But negative rights are an axiom of libertarianism. So when people try to tell me that conservatives are libertarian, no, they're not, because some might have some libertarian leanings, or they might have let me also diverge here between saying that someone isn't a libertarian and that they don't have libertarian beliefs. I think everyone on this planet has a belief that is libertarian. But what makes a person, rather than an idea, a libertarian is what they ground it upon. There might be somebody who thinks the government should get out of marriage and they're allowed to have 10 wives, but which is a very libertarian belief, but they're not a libertarian because what they ground it upon is FLDS teaching. They ground it upon a religious belief. That's a totally different grounding. So they have a libertarian belief, but it's not for libertarian reasons. And we get very, very confused on that. But I do so as well, because I try very hard to not say that somebody, though I'm not going to do that in this show. In this show, I'm very freely going to say conservatives are not libertarians. But generally, I don't say somebody's not a libertarian, because you usually don't know enough about them to know about their grounding philosophy. But I know enough about Ben to know that he's going to explain it himself, that he's not a libertarian, though he does hold some libertarian beliefs. And let me tell you who else is not a libertarian. Maybe you need to take a drink, because there's some people that this is going to hurt their feels. Trump isn't a libertarian. He's also not great at telling the truth. Now, if he puts an actual libertarian in the cabinet, great. Great. I think an actual libertarian appointment anywhere is great, but you don't sell your soul for it. What is the price of your soul? Okay, so let me put myself on mute and we'll continue. Wait, hold on. I want to look at my notes here a second, because again, I'm an MF and professional here. So negative rights, I said it has nothing to do with the moral good and went off. So that's where he goes off the rail. So I wrote down, to say you can only do things that people say are morally good is like saying free speech is only for beautiful speech. I'm glad that I read that, because I think that's a very good analogy. Is there really free speech if you're not free to say things that people think is morally bad? He later goes on to completely contradict himself on this. But anyway, yes, or it's not free speech. Now, should we encourage beautiful speech and beautiful actions within our communities? Absolutely. But that might differ from community to community. And I don't think we've really come to a handle with that with libertarianism. I'm not a Hoppian. I never have been. But I think you can get good from nearly any libertarian thinker. And the fact is, if we lived in libertarian utopia, people would group into like-minded communities. And they would socially, not coercively, enforce what these communities think is the moral good. And that will change over time because their children may think differently than the parents do. It's not going to stay static. Where I really disagree with Hapa, and we're probably going to get a show into this because I'm going to say something super, super controversial here to some people. Homeowners associations are not libertarian. We'll get into a whole show about this. I used to work in homeowners association law. Certainly within the law today, they are not libertarian because you have to actually have title into something, and covenants cannot run with the land, and you cannot impose obligations upon persons without taking upon certain liabilities. We'll get into that. So that's a lot where I disagree with Hapa, where he talks about these covenant communities, which are just basically glorified HOAs that stay static over time, over generations, and I just do not believe that is libertarian. But now, for perhaps a generation, perhaps for a decade, you can have a community that's relatively stable and having a very common culture and very common views. But there's going to be shifts as there's children, as people move in and out. I know the Hoppians get mad at me, but they're all mad at me right now anyway, so what do I care? A lot of what he describes sounds a lot more like feudalism than it does libertarianism. Okay, let's mute and let him continue.
Again, is something you have no duty not to do. I, for example, do not have a privilege to view pornography because I don't have a moral right to view pornography. There's nothing good about viewing pornography. There's nothing that says that I should be morally apathetic about viewing pornography. So,
and that's where he goes off the rails. You are not harming anyone else if the persons who are performing the pornography are willing participants and there isn't trafficking going on. Now, you might think you're harming yourself, but you have the right to harm yourself because you own yourself. You are not harming other people in a way that they have a right not to be harmed. Some people will say, well, a society in which men watch a lot of pornography makes them think less of women or have unrealistic views of women. I do not have a negative right for you to have a certain opinion of me. If women want there to be less pornography, they need to withhold themselves from men they know watch pornography, and it will stop. All of this can be done through voluntary means. Yes, Ben, you have a right to view pornography, though that is not a picture, a mental picture that I want. I'm getting the WAP lyrics again in my head. Yes, this is where you go completely off the rails and do not understand negative rights. You have an absolute right to view pornography. But people also have an absolute right to say, because you do that, you are not the sort of person I want to associate with. Now, I'd like to get into that in a greater context, and the whole cancel culture context, because say somebody does one thing that you don't like, does that mean you don't associate with them with anything? It's a big subject that I really haven't even come to a firm conclusion on. But at least I think we can say, if you're a let's say Ben wasn't married and you were a potential dating partner of Ben, you could make that a disqualifier. That's the way things get regulated. But to say that you don't have a right to view it because it's not moral, that begs the question, to whom? I can tell you, I personally, it depends, I guess, on the type of pornography and how you're defining pornography. Some people categorize Game of Thrones as softcore pornography. I didn't have any problem with Game of Thrones. Now, I know there's very abusive pornography out there. I'm not going to be acting like I'm some kind of porn expert or anything like that. But in general, I am morally neutral. It depends. It depends on the situation. But to make a blanket statement, there's been porn throughout all of human history. Go look at some of those Hindu carvings. They're pretty spicy. They're spicier than the stuff you're going to see on Twitter, just with, carving out in rocks. People are going to have artistic, and art can be in the eye of the beholder, artistic expressions of things that are so fundamental to human nature, such as sexuality. There are people who think the statue of David, Michelangelo's David, is pornographic because he's nude. So again, porn by whose standards, and who are you harming? Who else? Because you might think you're harming yourself, but who else are you harming? Okay, let's continue.
Privileges, again, are the kinds, it's kind of moral right. You have a right to do it because we are morally apathetic, or we think that what you're doing is good. Then there are claims. A claim is...
Okay, we're going to stop here. Who's this we that you speak of? Or things that we think you're doing that are good. Notice the creeping authoritarianism in there. Now, I'm not the type of person to invoke the Handmaid's Tale and everything, but I have to tell you, as I'm starting to listen to some of these very conservative, and particularly, obviously, the Christian nationalist type, which, Matt's not Christian, he's Jewish, so I'm obviously not calling him a Christian nationalist. But, Matt Walsh and who's that guy I haven't listened to in a while? Michael Knowles certainly are on that spectrum, though not as far as some of the ones that openly proclaim themselves as Christian nationalists. But, this is where that goes. There's no brakes on this thing. What if we, whoever this we is, thought that showing, as in some countries, that a woman showing her face is immoral, that her face is only for her husband? Okay, let's continue.
A right against you. So, for example, my child has a claim against me because I have a duty to provide for my child. You, however, do not have a claim against me for health care. That's why when I say that there is no right to health care, what I mean is that you do not have a claim against me to provide you health care. You might think that it's a nice thing for me to do.
Okay, let's stop there. Exactly. Because that would be a positive right. What a positive right is an obligation. It's something in which that you have to do something affirmatively rather than refrain from doing something for someone else. That is what oh, hold on one second. I'm getting a phone call. Oh, it stopped. I don't know if it was by accident, but if you are watching, I will call you back. A negative right, a positive right is where you have taken, you have an obligation to do something for somebody else. And libertarians do not believe in any positive rights. The only time that they'll believe in a claim or an obligation is when you voluntarily have taken that on themselves. Okay, so let's continue.
You don't actually have a moral claim on me that I must provide you health care. My child does. I owe duty to my child in a way I do not owe duty to you. So that's what a claim is, a claim right. Then there are powers.
Okay, and I notice us probably echoing a bit there. And right, I agree with him, and I disagree with Rothbard. I almost stopped being a libertarian when I heard of Rothbard's claim that parents did not have a duty to feed their infant. Yes, they do. That is a positive obligation that they took on upon themselves and have to find somebody else to take on that obligation. They can't just let their infant starve. If libertarianism logically led to the conclusion that you did not have an obligation to feed your infant, I would run away from it screaming as fast as I can. Okay, let's let him continue. So he's going to be talking about claims next. And claims is what I would call a positive right. But libertarians will only believe in claims that you voluntarily took upon yourself. We entered into a contract. Like when you join a political party, you've entered into a contract to follow the bylaws. You can leave at any time. Nobody's forcing you to stay.
Powers are abilities that allow you to alter another person's privileges or claims. So there are certain circumstances in which you have the power or somebody has the power over you to turn a non-claim into a claim, for example. So just to give a basic example, in an employment context, I have the power as an employer to dictate the hours of my employees' work, whether they're in the office or not, what they do at work. Now, in a normal context, I don't have that power. Right? If they were not in an employment situation, I don't have anything like that power. But since we signed a contract, and since I'm the employer and they are...
Okay, this is where he goes from claims to powers. It's the same thing. It's a positive right. You're not being forced to work there. It's a contract. It's not a power. It's a mutual obligation that you agreed to. It's not a power. It's a mutually voluntary exchange. Let me look at my notes to see if I said anything smarter earlier that I want to make sure that I says. Right. I'm going to give some religious examples here, the way I tend to, and I can't think of the religious term. And I know one of you guys, because I have a lot of very religious listeners that will think of it. What is that religious term that's used? I think it's from 1 Thessalonians, when it talked about how Christ gave up the privileges of deity and took on humanity. Even though he could have taken up the privileges, he emptied himself. It's called the emptying. What is that theological term? Crap, somebody say it in chat. But he voluntarily laid aside, emptied himself of the privileges of deity and took on the limitations of man. But he could have taken back those privileges at any time, which is why he said I think it was in the Garden of Gethsemane, don't you think at this moment I could call upon God the Father and he would send an army of angels to rescue me? But he chose not to. Oh my God, I have to, kenosis. Yes, it's kenosis. Thank you. We have some theologians in here. For those of you who don't know, I used to own a theological forum for well over a decade, and I have written a book that's used at least the last I heard, at Liberty University as required reading in an eschatological coursework. So if you're wondering why I happen to know a bit of obscure theology, that is why, but it's kenosis. And for those of you who are super, super curious, let me give you my theological positions. I am a Molinist. You have to be somewhat advanced to know what that is. I am an Orthodox preterist, and I'm also a post-millennialist. That might mean something to some people. It might not mean something to to others. Oh, and when it comes to Genesis, I believe in the framework theory. Let's see, what else might there be that I could give you my theological pedigree? I used to be a Calvinist for a very long time. I went from Arminian to Molinist to Calvinist back to Molinist. Molinism is a really, really interesting discussion, particularly when it comes to libertarianism. Skido, did you read it in that book called The Death of God and the Death of Christ? That really tiny book. I wish it wasn't N.T. Wright who wrote it. But what a wonderful book. I don't have very many of my theological books right now, but anyone can get in touch with me privately and I'll get you information on the book that I wrote. I don't believe everything in it in the way that I used to. Let me qualify that. I was stuck in a very fundamentalist religion for a long time. And when I wrote that book, I was in that mindset. I do not hold to some of the very strict fundamentalist beliefs in there, but I still hold to the broader theory. And it's an eschatological book arguing that nearly, not all, but nearly every event in the book of Revelation, and there's no S in the end of Revelation. If you say Revelations, I immediately know that you don't know what the hell you're talking about. Just like if you say Dallas Accords with an S on the end, that you don't know what you're talking about. But it's an exposition of Matthew 24. It's with footnotes, a 300 and something page book just on Matthew 24, and it is freaking hilarious. So if you're interested in eschatology and a post-millennial Orthodox preterist point of view, you might be interested. You might be interested in it. Okay, let's continue.
The employee, I now have the power over them. This is like government. Government also has inherent powers in certain areas in order to compel particular things. So the government, for example, has the power to tax. Now, that power is not unending.
Says who? Notice how he just throws that in. Without any foundation. Says who? And why not without any limitation if they have that power? It's only for as much as we'll tolerate. He gives no justification for this. And you want to know what? We are coming on 47 minutes. And I try to keep these shows about 45 or less. So we're going to do part 2 tomorrow. I'm going to go to some personal questions if you were just watching for this. So we will start with this idea of government powers. Hopefully tomorrow night or the next time I broadcast, I find viewership drops off when it gets too much over 45 minutes. So let's now, if that's all you wanted to watch was the Ben Shapiro stuff, you can leave now. Please do subscribe before you do, or you'll make baby Jesus cry. Throw me a super chat. There were a couple of questions that I was going to answer, I think, if I remember correctly. And then we will be done with this evening. Let me see here. Ruben, why wouldn't you like to see an interaction? So I'm going to put this up on the screen. It says, Ruben, I wouldn't like to see an interaction between you two. Okay. I would love to. Of course. I mean, obviously, I'm such a tiny creator that what tiny creator wouldn't love to interact with Ben Shapiro? But I would do it in a heartbeat. Oh, I see. You give a reason. You say, I'd get angry seeing two people I admire clashing and not bending towards my side at all. Yeah, that probably would be frustrating. So I get it. Okay, I get it. Not insulted, but I would certainly interact with Ben Shapiro at any time. Okay, let's see what else here. Nathan said, this isn't personal, but it's more on topic. Libertarianism is systematic or systemic. I think you meant systematic, but maybe systemic individualism. I would call it radical systemic individualism. In my opinion, what is the best country to live in? I am one of those typical ignorant American provincialists that I will tell you right off the bat that I do not know nearly enough about other countries. So to my knowledge, America is the best country to live in. I don't believe in countries. I'm an anarchist, but that's the most honest question that I can give you. I agree with you, Nathan, that Trump is a populist. This is interesting. Nathan says Hoppianism produces a social contract. Yeah, but it's allegedly a voluntary social contract, which we should have no problem with. My problem is, what about the descendants who didn't? See, I think a social contract is valid to the people who actually and affirmatively agreed to it. They can't agree to it for their descendants. And that's when we start getting into HOAs and why I think it's feudalism. Okay, let's see here. There was a thing on mental health issues. I'm going to put it up even though it's not really related, because mental health is one of my big talking points. Gamer JM, if you're still here, I don't know if you know. I'm very open about mental health. I've suffered my entire life with chronic depression, which has been nearly completely cured by ketamine therapy, which we can talk about in another show. I had OCD as a younger person and went through cognitive behavioral therapy, and I am officially diagnosed autistic. Big surprise, I'm sure, to a lot of you, because I think libertarians sometimes equal that. But I'm not self-diagnosed, and I'm not putting that down or anything. I'm just saying I've got the official papers, like a pedigree. I'm on the spectrum, but on the spectrum of what would have been called Asperger's in the past. So let me put that comment up there. And let me see here. Oh, I love this comment. So, Daniel says, I think Candace Owens would beat Ben Shapiro in a death match. I think you're correct. I never used to like Candace, but not saying I'm a fan or anything like that, but I do watch her show on the regular. She's changed a lot. Some of it good, some of it not so good. She's turning very Alex Jones, but I find her interesting, and I don't find her quite as patronizing as I used to. She's still kind of holier than thou. We're going to do some shows talking about Candace Owens, but I like that she's not scared to talk about anything. I got a lot of pushback one show when I said I do not dismiss anything out of hand. When I first heard a flat earth theory, I thought it was a joke. And then I found out there were people who really believed it, and like thousands of people went to conferences about flat earth. And I'm like, okay. Well, I'm not going to just dismiss that out of hand. Just so you know, I'm not a flat earther. Let me just get that right out there. But I said, I'm not going to just dismiss this out of hand. I want to know why these people think this. Why do they believe this? I spent nearly 40 hours, maybe 60 even, watching the best flat earth videos that there were out there to come to my own conclusion. And that's what I respect now about Candace, is that she's willing to even, she did, I think, the same thing, actually listen to what they had to say. Now, I came away completely and utterly unconvinced and can argue against it, but I didn't just immediately go, nah. I was taught differently in school. I've learned to question everything. So that is it for this evening. We will hopefully do part 2 tomorrow because we now are coming up on an hour. I ask you all again, please hit subscribe and consider becoming a patron. It would make me so happy if I got an email after the show at patreon.com/Pink Flame of Liberty to know that I had a new patron. It would make me very, very grateful. Also, again, please hit subscribe, and I will see you, hopefully, God willing, tomorrow. Mi guapas de libertad.
You gotta take what you're given, that's how we live it. Don't be mad at the system, it's simply how we've existed. I hear a lot of people talking like they politicians, or choose to be an accountant because it's safe in the business, not because they wanna